All right, here we go. Zach Harris Sports. Good morning, everybody. I tried to do a couple of different things to stream this live throughout my many different platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So if you want to join us live, feel free to follow us on Facebook at Fox Sports 980 at Zach Harris Sports. Also, just Zach Harris, add me as a friend. I like to think of when we're talking sports, me and you are friends, we're talking one on one. So I love the conversations, I love the chats. So feel free to get in touch. Follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter at ZachFS980, ZachFS980. Also at WOFX980 on Twitter for you Twitter fans. I know there's a lot of hateful people out there, but Twitter is just a different kind of animal. And if you're looking for sports stuff, it is a great atmosphere for sports stuff. This podcast will also be posted. Download the free iHeartRadio app, search Zach Harris Sports. As soon as this podcast ends, right here, the live video, I'm going to throw it on over to the iHeartRadio app. Just download the iHeartRadio app, search Zach Harris Sports. But I want to get into college football. Now, I know I have a show tomorrow, Sunday at 11 a.m. for the love of sports. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. right there on 980 a.m., 95.9 FM, or the free iHeartRadio app. Feel free to tune in Sundays. We're a call-in show as well. But I wanted to talk about college football because we are getting ready for the greatest week one in college football history. And I don't mean to sound a slight to any other college football week ones, but we have 5 matchups between ranked opponents. That's the most since 1950 when preseason polls began. So before that, they didn't have preseason polls. But since 1950, we have had the most week one ranked opponent matchups in college football history. You're talking about Oklahoma, they're going against Tulane, but obviously you have Penn State and Wisconsin, Alabama, Miami, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana of Lafayette, Texas, the list goes on, Georgia and Clemson, which is one of the cream of the crop premieres. And then another game that I'm going to get into, even though it's not ranked versus ranked, is number 16 LSU taking on UCLA, Chip Kelly's school. This may be his last shot to keep a job. But let's start with, I'm going to start with Oklahoma at Tulane. So you have number 2 Oklahoma going against Tulane. And the reason that this is of intrigue to me is obviously you take a look at top to board. You have Bryce Young starting for Alabama. You have Clemson getting their first glimpse of DJ Uiagalelei, who, that's a difficult name to pronounce, but as difficult as a name to pronounce, he has that much experience. He's had a couple of games in absence of Trevor Lawrence due to COVID, but now he gets the full starting range for Clemson. So obviously that's a new quarterback. You take a look across the board in the top 5, you have multiple first-time starting quarterbacks, and that's where Spencer Rattler comes in with Oklahoma. He has the experience. He's not a first-year starter. He's gone through the ups and downs, and you take a look at this guy. I know he had a rough patch in the first 4 games where he had 13 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. You take a look what he did in his last 7 games where they went on an absolute tear later on in that COVID-riddled season. 15 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. So obviously one of the Heisman frontrunners, but also could this be the year that Oklahoma gets over the top? And obviously going against Tulane, it's not the greatest of matchups, but as a number 2 seed, you got to come out on all cylinders, especially when you have a guy like Spencer Rattler, who is the premier quarterback in terms of all these other quarterbacks that are just getting their first starts or their first handful of starts under their belt. This is the team to be on the lookout because Spencer Rattler, been there, has done that. Not only is he a Heisman frontrunner, he's also a NFL first-round pick talent. So that's one of the reasons to watch this game, is to see how that gets excited. Now let's get into the first of the 5 slated ranked matchups. Like I said, 5 ranked matchups for the first time in college football history since 1950 when preseason polls began. You have Wisconsin hosting number 19 Penn State. Now, number 12, Wisconsin. This isn't the Wisconsin of old. This isn't the Wisconsin that we know that's going to run the ball all over you. Because you take a look at them and their run game, which is normally dominant, they have ranked 72 in rush success rate last year. Not your typical Corey Clement and the list of the other Wisconsin backs that go on and on and on. We don't have enough time in the podcast to name all the running backs that have been through Wisconsin. But let's just say Wisconsin is the powerhouse when it comes to running games in college football. And that was not the case last year. Then you take a look at their quarterback, Graham Mertz, who, talk about hot and cold. Jekyll and Hyde. However you want to phrase it. You talk about Jekyll and Hyde, hot and cold. In his 4 wins, the team averaged 39 points per game with a QBR rating of 79.6. In those 3 losses that he had as the starting quarterback for Wisconsin, 6.7 points per game, a QBR of 24.6, and it basically comes down to he can't have it all on his shoulders. He needs to have a run game. This is a team that's always predicated themselves on running the ball, dominating the game in the trenches, being on the offensive side and the defensive side, and then letting their quarterback make plays when plays are needed to be made. Now, Graham Mertz does have the talent, as apparent in those 4 wins when they averaged 39 points per game. But it starts with the run game, ends with the run game, because you need that to be a dominant force and be able to work off that play action and everything else. Now you look at Penn State, who had a terrible last year, and I'm going to write that off. I'm going to say that's an anomaly, because for the simple fact that we had the COVID-riddled year, there wasn't fans, there wasn't this, there wasn't that. It was hard to gain your own personal spark in college football, because one thing that college football has done greater than the NFL is have that fan interaction, have that atmosphere affect the game more than it does in the NFL. Not to say that it doesn't affect the NFL, but you take a look at the NFL and come to betting lines and everything, home field advantage is roughly 3 points, and I think it's far more than that in college football, especially with the way the fans show up, hundreds of thousands of fans. And so I'm going to really take that Penn State season and throw that out the window. That's an anomaly, because Sean Clifford is a veteran quarterback that knows where to go with the football. And you take a look at, they got off to the rough start, the 0-5 season. Penn State's going down the drain. Do they fire James Franklin? Is he the worst coach in Penn State history? Blah, blah, blah. This is a team that's never really been able to get going after all the other nonsense off the field that they had to go through. But you take a look at this team that started 0-5. This offense averaged 24.5 points per game. But then they really came on late. They won 4 in a row, 36.3 points per game. Sean Clifford played outstandingly better those last 4 games. So this is one of the premier matchups that's going to go a long way into deciding, who wins that conference, who's going to come out on top and be one of the big dogs to hopefully host hopefully play in a college pick six or whatever the hell they call it now, bowl game. And then, like I said, we're going to continue our streak of college football matchups between ranked opponents, because we got 5 of them today. And the next one slated for 3:30. You can catch that one on ABC. Number 1 Alabama takes on number 14 Miami. Once again, Miami's had an up and down time, ever since the days of Willis McGahee and, the list goes on. Ray Lewis's. There's so many great players that have come through Miami, but Miami has not been that way for a long time, and they're looking to change it this year. They have a huge veteran in QB in D'Eriq King. Sorry, I apologize about his name. D'Eriq King, who has been around the league, played for Houston, now he's played for Miami. He's been in the league for about college football for about 5-6 years, it seems. Everything has compiled, whether it be due to injury, COVID, blah, blah, blah. He's been in college football ranks for about 6 years now. And he's also coming back with an O-line that's combined for 159 starts. They were returning 10 offensive starters. So that goes in a long way of being ranked number 14 and representing Miami in a way that they haven't been represented in the years of the 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s, where they've had some great players come in and out of that system. We don't want to talk about the off-field stuff and what got into these players getting into Miami. And then they're going against a number one Alabama who won the championship last year with Mac Jones, who ended up being a first-round pick now with the New England Patriots. And obviously the storyline here is the dual-threat quarterback of Bryce Young, who coming out of high school was the number one ranked dual-threat quarterback, and I believe the number 5th ranked quarterback in the whole country coming out of high school, sat behind Mac Jones. And I apologize for this because I thought Mac Jones was a very good quarterback, but I thought Bryce Young was going to be that quarterback that took him over the top. Obviously, Mac Jones had the swagger to take him to the national championship and win the national championship, becoming a first-round pick. So that was more evident as the season went along, and it really helped the progress of Bryce Young, who was able to get some scattered pass attempts and some scattered experience last year. So it's not like he's getting thrown to the wolves, but this is his first season starting. But the problem is, Alabama that, has turned into a powerhouse for quarterbacks. You talk about Tua Tagovailoa starting in the NFL, Mac Jones starting in the NFL, Jalen Hurts starting in the NFL. When's the last time that we've really had a successful starting Alabama quarterback in the NFL? Now, I know college football is a different animal. You can take a look at Jason White of Oklahoma, who won the Heisman however many years ago, never panned out in college, transitioning from college football to the NFL. So obviously it's a different animal, but we're talking about NFL type of talent coming out of Alabama since Nick Saban's taken over. And now we're turning our heads to the quarterback position, which we once was an afterthought with Nick Saban, is now become the premier, the face, the headline of Alabama. So number one dual threat recruit coming out of high school, Bryce Young obviously is going to lead that offense, but you have a young, inexperienced wide receiver and running back group that is led by the veterans, John Mechie, who has done a great job last year, being that second or third role, depending on where we were in college football season. Obviously, when Jalen Waddle went out, it really took a toll on this wide receiver group, but opened up for John Mechie to be that number two. Now he's becoming that number one. How can he deal with being that number one and leading that young, inexperienced wide receiver group? And then you have Brian Robinson Jr., who is the veteran of the running back group. But then you have Bryce Young, obviously leading the way. And then you have defensive starters that are returning that really lead the way. This team has lost an immense amount of talent to the NFL. And this is a team that you can say they never have to reload or retool. They just reload. And that's exactly what Alabama has been. They've been a powerhouse time and time again, and nothing is going to change. They just have a young, inexperienced offense that is going to have some learning to do, some growing to do. But Bryce Young is a guy that, coming out of high school, being the number one dual threat, I truly believe he's going to be one of the premier players of college football this season. So keep an eye out for Bryce Young, already making over $1 million in the NIL deals. But the on-the-field stuff is really what's going to get him noticed because he is one of the premier crops. Obviously, like I talked about, this defense, the Alabama defense, who as of late, they've struggled with the running quarterback. So King of Miami is going to have his way, but when push comes to shove, can he make the precision passes that ultimately beat this Alabama defense like we've seen in the past with Johnny Manziel and the list of other quarterbacks that are able to be mobilized in the college football game? But this is a team, the Alabama team, that returns a bunch of veteran starters, a bunch of all-pro players that are going to continue to get seen at the next level in the NFL. And this is a team that over the last 5 games or so, they had 20-plus sacks. So that's another great matchup. The next matchup I want to talk about, because like I said, I'm going to keep repeating this. This is the greatest Week 1 college football has ever seen, with 5 premier matchups between ranked opponents, the most since 1950 when preseason polls began. So we're going to keep reiterating that as we jump from ranked matchup to ranked matchup. The next ranked matchup I want to talk about is number 17 Indiana versus number 18 Iowa. Now, this is a tough game to predict because obviously you have Indiana and their starting quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., coming off an ACL tear. But when he was playing, he was having a very, very good college football season last year. And it looked like they were going to make the college football playoffs. Obviously, with the COVID and the rules changing by committee and everything else, and whether you think Ohio State deserved to get into it or not, or if it was Indiana's to get into the championship game that ultimately led to the college football playoffs, that's a different discussion for another day. But Indiana was having a great season until Michael Penix Jr. went down. And one of the guys on the receiving end of that, a name to watch out again this year, is Ty Freifogel. And for those of you who don't know about Ty Freifogel, first of all, excellent college football name. But that's the wide receiver that Michael Penix has loved the most. You take a look at before the ACL injury, you're talking about, if you exclude the Maryland game where he tore his ACL, 31 catches, 642 yards for Freifogel. The 2 games following it, and like I said, we're excluding the Maryland game where he tore his ACL. 4 receptions, 69 yards, a non-factor after Michael Penix Jr. went down. So that's what you're looking for Indiana. You know they're going to bring it on the defensive side of the ball. Can Michael Penix Jr. bounce back as the quarterback that was supposed to take this team to the next level? Then they go against number 18 Iowa, and they have a quarterback who was very turnover prone in the first 2 games. He had 3 interceptions and an ugly 21-20 loss to Northwestern that dropped him to 0-2 on the season. But they reeled off 6 straight wins with 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and it's going to come down to quarterback play for Iowa. Can they take the next step? This is a team that has been relegated to success in the recent years of college football bowl games, especially late in the college football bowl games season. But that's going to be a good matchup. That's going to decide, who comes out of that conference as well. So a lot of great games. Like I said, 5 slated games between ranked opponents, the most since 1950. And I got to keep reiterating it because it's just truly astounding that we've never had a week 1 quite like this. And next on the matchup, sorry, Louisiana at Lafayette. I'm not going to call you the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. I'm going to call you Louisiana at Lafayette Raging Cajuns because that's what you are. Number 23, Louisiana at Lafayette going against number 21, Texas. What's at stake for Louisiana at Lafayette is they're coming off back-to-back 10-win seasons, the only 10-win seasons in their college history. And they're looking to establish themselves as not only a 10-win team, but a team that really can play on New Year's Eve College 6 bowl games. This is a team that's looking to take the next step as well under head coach Billy Napier, who spent time with Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban. He's a very smart young guy, early 40s, has really taken control of Louisiana at Lafayette, changed the culture there, and has really helped establish this team as a contender for relative bowl games that you really want to watch. They're going against number 21 Texas with new coach Steve Sarkisian coming fresh off the Nick Saban coaching rehab. The wheel has gone around and around on the coaching rehab. Steve Sarkisian and a list of other head coaches that have come out there, Lane Kiffin as well as many other. Bill O'Brien going back to Alabama. Brian Dable spent some time there before taking an offensive coordinator job with the Buffalo Bills. We all know how that turned out in the NFL. But he's coming fresh off the Nick Saban coaching rehab at Alabama, Steve Sarkisian is. And with his first move, he's got his quarterback, Hudson Card, who won the starting job and is making his first career start against the Louisiana at Lafayette Raging Cajuns. Sark, obviously this is going to be a little bit of a rebuild because they're coming off Tom Herman, and we're not going to talk about that era of Texas, but Steve Sarkisian is looking to reestablish himself as one of the better head coaches in college football. I'm not going to say the best, one of the better college football coaches who can consistently get you to the bowl game. But is that enough for Texas, who was once a predominant school, now is just looking for some consistency? So this is just the first step for number 21 Texas to take with Hudson Card, their starting quarterback that's going to make his first start, won the job in the spring, making his first start with Steve Sarkisian as the new head coach, who's going to do a great job recruiting there at Texas. But can he turn that talent into consistency and hopefully make this team a top 10 team in the AP polls, the coaching polls, and the college football playoff polls at a consistent basis? Because this is what Texas has going for them, because that's what they've established as their guideline, that they want to be a top 10 team. They want to be a college football playoff contender. And to get there, this is just a small step under Steve Sarkisian, going in his first game as head coach of Texas, going against a ranked opponent that has a great culture under head coach Billy Napier, who, like I said, spent some time under Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban. Now, the last premier matchup between ranked opponents, like I said, first time since 1950 that you've had 5 ranked matchups in week 1. Number 5 Georgia versus number 3 Clemson. And I've done a lot of homework on this. Not a lot of homework on the game itself, but a lot of homework on the quarterback's name for Clemson. And you should too, because this is a tough last name to say. DJ Uiagalelei. You say it a little faster than that, but I broke it down for you so you can get used to saying it, because this is a kid that they're not going to miss a beat with when it comes to losing Trevor Lawrence, number 1 in the NFL, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So get used to DJ Uiagalelei. That's how you technically say it, but Uiagalelei. Get used to it. Memorize it, because this is a name that you're not going to want to forget. We saw him a little bit last year in place of Trevor Lawrence when he went through the COVID protocols and everything. But this kid is the real deal, a dual threat quarterback that can make the right throws inside the pocket and outside of the pocket. Did an outstanding job in absence of Trevor Lawrence. And guess what? Now it's his reins. Now it's his starting gig. And guess what? That's a name to watch out for, because absolutely he has the talent to take the next level. And we're going to be talking about this kid entering the NFL draft in a year, possibly 2 years, depending on his feel for the game. And then you're going against JT Daniels, the number 5 Georgia team. This is a team that has national championship aspirations, lost to Alabama a couple of years ago under Tua Tagovailoa, the 2nd and 26 play where they threw a ball deep to Devontae Smith that really busted on the scene. Devontae Smith, now a first-round draft pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. But JT Daniels, they finally have their quarterback at Georgia, a guy that's not afraid to throw it deep, has great accuracy. But not only that, they have the playmakers around him now. They always have good running backs. This year they have decent running backs, but it's the wide receiver and tight end group that has really, stood out to me. This is an outstanding group of tight ends and wide receivers for Georgia, but they're going to be dealing with a little bit of injury in the opening of the college football season. They're going to be out without George Pickens, who is really their star wide receiver. Dominic Blaylock is most likely out dealing with an injury that dates back to last year. And then what are they going to look like on the defensive side of the ball? They always bring it in the trenches. We know that defensive line going against Clemson's offensive line is going to be a battle to watch out for. As well as, we didn't talk about it, the defensive line for Clemson has got some NFL guys on it as well. So you're talking about 2 teams with great defensive trenches that are really going against offensive lines. Get after these quarterbacks. And JT Daniels, we know what he's going to bring. He had a great year last year in the 4 games that he played, but he's going to finally have the position skilled players around him that's needed to take the next step. We know what we're going to get from the defensive side of the ball. It's the offensive side of the ball. And I think this is the year we see JT Daniels grow as a quarterback. You know, the outstanding USC recruit now with Georgia the last 2 or 3 years is really looking to take the next step. He has the wide receivers. He has the tight ends around him. And the defensive side of the ball from Georgia, what are we going to get? We know what we're getting in the trenches. The defensive backs, they just lost a couple of good ones in the NFL draft. What can they get? They actually have a Clemson transfer at the defensive back position. Sheridan Jones, who started some games for Clemson, is now transferred to Georgia. He's slated to start for Georgia, but they have some young, inexperienced guys behind him. And then the last matchup that I want to talk about, and it's not a ranked matchup, but the only reason of intrigue it has to me, a Chip Kelly-led UCLA team that is looking to bounce back over the last handful of years and establish themselves as a potential top 25 team, dominated a Hawaii team 44-10 last week. Now, this isn't the same Hawaii team that we've all known and loved with Colt Brennan, R.I.P., rest in peace to Colt Brennan, but this isn't the same Hawaii team, the run and gun style that we know of Hawaii. But a 44-10 win over Hawaii, no matter who is playing, is a very good victory and a great start for UCLA. But Chip Kelly, this is his last shot to prove that he's a good coach and that UCLA can be a top 25 team. This is a team that's going to be run dominant, as seen last week when they ran for almost 250 yards. And then their quarterback, who is a veteran quarterback but very inconsistent, Dorian Thompson Robinson, is a inconsistent quarterback, but this is a run-heavy team. You just need Robinson to make the plays when the plays are there to be made. They're going against number 16 LSU, who went 5-5 last year. They had a handful of injuries. Like we said earlier in this segment, we're going to throw last year out due to COVID, due to no fans in the stand. It was an anomaly. So we're going to take last year LSU anomaly 5-5, but their starting quarterback, Brennan's out for at least, the first part of the college football season. So you got sophomore Max Johnson, who got some experience last year in a handful of games that he was able to play. 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. They went 2-3 in those games. But really, this LSU team needs to show that they're here for the long haul. Because you take a look across the street, and you got Alabama and Georgia that continually don't need to rebuild. They just reload, and they know what they are. You know what you're getting from Georgia and Alabama. And if you want to be a big dog in the SEC, you can't have down years like last year. And Ed Orgeron absolutely knows that and understands that this isn't a rebuilding, this is a reloading. And for us to continually be premier of the crop in the SEC, we can't reload, we can't retool, we got to reload. And that's what he looks to establish this year, coming off a 5-5 year. Just an intriguing matchup for me. Number 16 LSU against a very good UCLA team that has top 25 potential. This is Zach Harris Sports. Thanks for watching. If you didn't get a chance to watch live on Facebook, it's going to be on the podcast. Download the free iHeartRadio app. Search Zach Harris Sports. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you go ahead, download the free iHeartRadio app. Follow Zach Harris Sports, as this podcast will be posted immediately following the end of our Facebook Live. And tune in every Saturday as I preview the premier matchups of college football. And enjoy Week 1. Because like I talked about, 5 ranked matchups, the most since 1950 when preseason polls began. Slated to be a great day. You got great weather, great matchups. Continue to enjoy it. Continue to enjoy Zach Harris Sports. And I look forward to talking to you guys next Saturday right around 10 o'clock. Enjoy the day. And make sure you download the free iHeartRadio app. Search Zach Harris Sports.